Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. And make sure and stay current on ish happenings on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Evangelicalish. That's evangelical with an ish. Now to Paul, Jeremy, and April on this episode of Evangelical-ish. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Evangelicalish. I am Paul.
I'm April.
And I'm Jeremy. Just kidding. I tried to do an Oklahoma accent. I don't know if it.
What was that? You missed the You just kind of went Jeremy.
I tried to say I'm Jeremy, but I'm a little glitchy. Is really what I am.
Jeremy.
Well, what's your real name?
My real name is Abbey.
Yeah,
Hi,
so
I'm Abbey.
If y'all have been listening from the beginning, Abbey was on one of our, definitely in the first season, like one of the very first episodes we had from a while, but she's one of my like real life friends and a former pastor, and she is just a good time. And so when Jeremy had to bail last minute,
I do love to be described like that.
Real life friend? Does that mean like you've seen?
Oh no, I meant good time, but I guess real life friend also is a positive. I should reevaluate my validation.
I don't remember what I was saying, but I'm glad you're here, Abbey. Thanks for coming in very last minute. But
thank you for having me.
Yes.
Well, welcome everyone. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a like and a review and help us out that way. Otherwise, you can always listen to us live and watch us live at 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern. And so we're glad those of you who are here with us live on the live stream. Good to have you.
Yes.
All right, let's do the show.
I'm gonna take a picture of some of these comments and probably post it and tag Jeremy because like my ego is this is excellent for me.
Yeah, and people are giving Abbey lots of love. Well deserved. Well deserved. So just a couple days ago was it 2 days ago? What is today? The 13th?
Today's the 13th.
Yeah,
okay, so it was a few days ago, if you're listening later.
It was 22 years ago this week.
Oh my gosh.
22 years ago this week was September 11th in 2001. And I can't believe it's been 22 years. There are students.
That's so crazy.
There are college students that weren't alive when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
I, in my most recent role as a pastor, worked very predominantly with like Gen Z young adults. And we had this whole like, they literally gathered around me as I sat in the small group and they were like, tell us about life before 9/11. And it was the first time I really realized I was in a room with a bunch of people who either weren't like sentient or weren't alive. And it was painful.
Well, I think it says something about age. And I, for a long time, was like young people, like millennials. And then people were like, well, millennials can have children now. And they're getting up there in age. So millennials aren't necessarily young
up
people.
There in age.
Which is only how people who are getting up there in age say it.
Getting up there. Yeah, so I thought I'm curious where everyone was. I think it's always an interesting tidbit just to say where you were when you were at 9/11, since there's people these days that could say they weren't anywhere because they weren't alive, which is wild to me. And then we're going to talk about just kind of the impact that post 9/11 happened, not only on the world, but the evangelical church. And oh my gosh, just wild things, because it was a tragedy that Abbey and I were kids for. What grade were you in, Abbey?
I was going to say kids is a really generous term. I mean, I was
you were in high school?
Yeah, I was a junior in high school.
That's a kid.
I know, but I feel like people who say they were a kid, like someone just said they were 5. To me, that's like a kid. I was a fully cognizant, aware human. You know what I mean? There was no hiding it.
But I feel in some ways, though, that's scarier because you're old enough to understand the ramifications for what's happening, sure. But like still young enough for it to like traumatize you.
Yeah.
How old were you, April, when it happened?
I was in 8th grade, but I was homeschooled at the time. So I was like, it was my in between. I had gone to public school 7th grade, and then I went back 9th grade, but I was homeschooled my 8th grade year. And so my mom actually woke me up from my bed. It was like 8 in the morning, I think, ish, maybe 7:30. And but my mom, I don't ever see my mom at that hour because I was usually asleep, I guess. And she had one of those like clay green masks on and really looked like an alien.
Oh
And
my
I had never
gosh.
seen my mom wear one of those before. And so she woke me up. And that's the first thing that I saw was her like alien face. And she just said, April, our country is under attack. Get out of bed. And I was like, what is happening? So I got out of bed. So that was
I'm sorry. We like floated right past. Like, that is so intense.
It was so intense. It was.
I thought having teachers stop class and like people walk. I thought that was intense, but like to be woken up in the morning, that's wow.
It was a lot.
Did it take right away when she said it? Like, did it hit like
I honestly
this
thought I
is
was
real, or were you like, she's being a little weird right now?
I thought I was dreaming because I'd never seen my mom wearing one of those masks before,
Yeah.
and she looked really creepy, like on top of what she was saying. So I was like, "Is this a dream?" But then we literally watched the news like all morning. I don't think we didn't do school that day, but I saw the second plane hit the second World Trade Center like live on TV and watched both collapse live. Like it's
so interesting that no one, because I was in public school and I did too, each classroom.
Yeah.
I don't even know why anybody shifted from class to class that day. We should have all just stayed in the class we were in when it happened, because all anybody did all day was watch TV, like watch the live news happening, to the point where there weren't enough TVs to go around. So classes were crammed into one room all together. And it's crazy now to think like no adult was like, maybe we don't subject these children to this.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. And well, at the time too, my dad was actually supposed to fly home that day from Atlanta because he was speaking at a church somewhere in Atlanta, but like they had shut down airports everywhere. So he got one of the last rental cars and like drove through the night to get to us. But we literally thought like we were next because everyone was just so. I mean, we lived in Dallas, which was another big city. So they were pretty much saying like if you lived in a big city, you were on high alert that you could be next. It was a lot.
Yeah.
Where were you living then, April?
In Dallas, Texas. Where were you, Paul?
So I was, I lived out on the West Coast, so it happened very, very early in the morning here. And so somebody called me and woke me up and said a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And I think I'm trying to remember, I think the second plane had already hit. And so I was on the phone with people all day. For some reason, I wasn't working that day. But we just, we're trying to figure out what happened. And, and then the next thing, is like, oh, there's a plane that crashed in Pennsylvania and another one that crashed into the Pentagon. Although Marjorie Taylor Greene tells us that never happened, but and it was just, I didn't have a sense of like, oh, we're under attack, but it's like, okay, this is a moment of terrorism on our soil. And, but
I didn't even know the word terrorism before that day.
Because they had, I mean, it was like 93, which would have been ahead of you all's time. But when there was a bomb that blew up underneath the World Trade Center that the terrorist had hoped would bring it down, but it just caused a lot of damage and killed people. But so terrorism had happened before, and even at the World Trade Center. But it seemed we were like, oh, it's pretty smart of the terrorists to take huge planes with lots of fuel and drive them into the building because they were going to do a lot of damage. So it was definitely an interesting time.
How old were you?
So my daughter was born in 99, so she would have been 2. So I was probably 27, 28, somewhere in there.
As like a fully fledged adult with like children, did you have fear the way every person that I've mostly spoken to has been people within my own age bracket, and we all had fear, but it was this very like nebulous. I couldn't have told you what I was afraid of. It was
Right.
fear. As someone with a little more social awareness and like a kid, did that impact how you felt that fear? Was it more concrete, or was it still that sort of abstract, nebulous fear?
I don't think it struck me with fear. I think the way my brain works, I was like, just like I said, first I'm like, oh, flying the planes, take off in Boston and fly into the World Trade Center. That's pretty smart. I was kind of thinking of it logistically like that, but I think some of us were in that, also in the, okay, who are we going to go fuck up over this? Which apparently is what George Bush was thinking too. Like, what country can we find to just randomly attack to feel better about this? But I don't remember being in great fear. And of course, I lived long far away, but it didn't seem like an invasion or anything like that. It was just a really powerfully coordinated and scary terrorist attack.
Well, I then because we used to fly all the time, and before 9/11, you could actually go to the gate with whoever was flying and say goodbye, or wait for them at the gate to come right off the plane and run and give them hugs. And once 9/11 happened, that all shut down. Like I have very distinct memories of like waiting at the gate, like looking out the window for my dad's plane to come back from wherever he was and being so excited. And then suddenly, like, you just could not do that anymore.
Yeah. A lot of stuff changed after that. And I do remember thinking at that time, then when they put together the Department of Homeland Security, again, just how my brain works, I'm like, this is not going to end well. We're all going to be sorry that my message to people was like, the point of terrorism is to get you to react in terror. And the way you defeat terrorism is you refuse to allow them to terrorize you. And so once we started making really irrational decisions, I'm like, yeah, we're not doing this well.
Were you against the war the whole time?
I was leery of it, and I had some sense of our leaders are lying to us again. And I worked with some people who were adamantly opposed to going into Iraq or Afghanistan, either one. I just remember thinking, and I was just really starting in my something's wrong with this political religion that we have here at time. And so then I started saying, our Christian president is lying to us. This is not good. And it was pretty clear to me that we were we had picked somebody that we could beat in Iraq, that they really didn't have anything to do with 9/11. We needed to extract revenge against somebody. And when you think about it now, the estimate is we killed somewhere between 200 and 300,000 innocent Iraqis in the Iraq War for no reason. Like, we had no justifiable reason to go in there. We made one up. And, so this is, as we look at our post, how did 9/11 change us? That was where I really started thinking like, wow, we really love our military power. We really depend on it. And I don't think it's our best attribute. And even all our holidays, our American holidays, as my British expat friends always tell me, like, gosh, you guys celebrate war a lot. You really like celebrating war and military. And they always thought that was a very uniquely American thing. And I think part of our lesson of 9/11 should be maybe our love of military and violence, and the ability to, as Mike Huckabee once said, the military is all about breaking things and killing people. And maybe being the best at breaking things and killing people in the world doesn't make us such a great nation sometimes.
Well, even from like early education, when you're taught about like the American Revolution and just the wars that we fought our entire existence, even the Civil War was glamorized in a sense, but it was always like this idea that God blessed America and that America is the good guys. And so when America goes to war, it's because it's for a good reason and it's good versus evil and it's very black and white. And then you realize that it's not like that at all. But after 9/11, of course, I was in 8th grade. And then so the Iraq War and the weapons of mass destruction and Saddam Hussein and all the things happened like pretty much when I was in high school. And I was all for the war. I was rah, blow things up because I know. I mean, I was a very Republican.
You were a child.
I know. But I was like, I watched Fox News like religiously. And I was just very much like these are bad people. We're the good guys. And literally, I just found when we were moving, I found a bunch of stuff and I found an old journal from 11th grade. So I was probably 16. And this is so bad. But the title of it was kind of like my political ramblings from high school. I titled it, "When Life Gives You Lemons, Throw Them at a Liberal."
Oh my God. I really hope that is a chapter title in your forthcoming book. It really needs to be.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, but literally my first political entry in this was me complaining about the sissies in my generation for being against the war.
Oh.
No, I'm laughing, but it's so pathetic. It's just cringy. But it was me. That's who I was.
Oh my gosh. That's so funny because I was on the entirely opposite side of the spectrum.
You were probably the sissy I was writing about.
Oh my God. I literally went to a protest of the war that happened at my state's capital, which isn't as impressive as it sounds because I lived in that city, but like that's where it was being held and it was being fashioned after Vietnam protests. I mean, and I'm self-aware enough to say this now. It wasn't just being fashioned after it in like ethic or, construct. Like literally people were like, dress like it's night. It was, if people could make anti-war protests a aesthetic, that's also what was happening, which is a bunch of dumb fucking college kids who were like, they couldn't politically explain why they were against it or what the harm being done was, but they were against it, man. Fuck George W. Fuck that. Like, so I was on the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, but it happened at the onset of my junior year, which is when everyone's making college plans and starting to think about where are you going to apply for college and all of that kind of thing. It changed the plans of so many of the guys in my grade and in the grade above me even, who immediately their plan shifted to join the military. Not because they had any sort of ambitions for the military, but because we were at war. And it was the quote unquote right thing to do. And so I was watching people who I looked at as like friends and brothers, people who I sang in choir with. And I'm thinking, you're going to go shoot people? Like you have to lose something of yourself to do that. And I don't want any part of you lost. So I was against the war right away, but from a very like personal anecdotal space, and the politics followed.
That makes sense. I do feel like in just like evangelical culture in general after that, like growing up, we're always taught that violence is not necessary, that violence is never what you want to do. But then you like look at like the Hebrew Bible and the Old Testament, and it's like, well, God was violent a bit. He definitely, and they're like, well, that was a different time. Then Jesus came and now we're peace and blah, blah, blah. At least like that's what they would teach you in Sunday school. But there were always exceptions to the rule. Like you could self-defend yourself with guns if you needed to. So you needed to have all the guns, and you could go to war against bad people if you deemed them to be bad. But then I felt like we suddenly started hearing less about like the pacifist Jesus and the laying down your weapons and the turning the other cheek. And it was very much more focused on like Jesus as a roaring lion coming back. And like, oh my gosh, the amount of times I heard about the end times and like the war to end all wars at the end where Jesus is going to come back and like wipe away a third of the earth and that we get to do it with him.
Well, because Iraq is right there, you know, that's right in the middle of Revelations. And and the narrative at the time was, oh my gosh, these evil, and excuse me for saying this, but these evil Muslim people, they did this just because we're Christian and good. That's why they did this. And
like 2001 America was some bastion of like Christian ethics that everyone knew that we were raunchy. By then, nobody was associating us with the church, but they definitely milked it.
Yeah.
Well, the church was associating us with America all the time. So we were the main, the main character in our own story.
Yeah.
And the irony of that is
the church really has main character energy, honestly.
Yes.
The irony is that countries like Iran think we export evil, you know, that we export sex and all of these things. And we think they hate us because we're good. And so there was this great justification of these are enemies of God. And so we can kill them. But
and they would parade like news stories about these Al-Qaeda forces. I feel like I've seen the same news story every time there is any sort of scuffle happening that gains American attention in the Middle East. They bring up pictures and videos of insert, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, whatever, destroying churches, like ancient churches. And it was like, you never heard about all the other things they were destroying or trampling, but you heard about the churches they were trashing because they knew that it would rile us up and it would feel like they were attacking us as Christians, not just America.
Right. It became so like insidious. A holy war. Yeah. Like I suddenly knew all these words from Islam just based on the people, like on the Christians calling them out. I mean, I don't know if I should admit this, but my dad wrote a track about the truth about terrorism. And it's just like very anti-Muslim, pretty much. And I didn't know anything about Islam.
Way to say it. This is very anti-Muslim.
It was not pro-Muslim. We'll put it that.
Which we are, to be clear.
Oh yeah. There's nothing. I wish I knew then what I knew now, because I was so I was afraid of every Muslim that I saw because I thought they were all in cahoots to like hate me because that's what I was taught, and I didn't have the wherewithal to question who was telling me
because you were a child and you trusted the people who said that. And so and
the irony now is I get a lot of Christians that when I'm critiquing evangelicalism or right-wing Christianity, they're like, that's not all Christians, you can't say that. And I always say, after 9/11 we told every Islamic person in America, you have to speak out and denounce that. You have to tell us that you're not a terrorist and not for that. And so today I say to Christians, you're either calling out January 6th and this right-wing extremism in the church, or you are complicit to it.
Yeah, right. We didn't condemn all of Christianity when those Jesus flags stormed the Capitol on January 6th. They said not all Christians then. Of course, some of them thought that was also a holy war. So,
And by the way, April, we're going to have a guest next week who is somebody prominent in an Islamic community. And we're going to learn more about Islam next week. So
that's amazing. I can't wait for that. But I definitely thought you were going to say that you were going to have someone who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th on next. I was like, how did they get them?
Well, my God. Ashley Babbitt's mom this week saying, we have every right to hang Nancy Pelosi. And again, YouTube gods, I'm not saying that it is. That was Ashley Babbitt's mom, who is now a hero because her daughter stormed the Capitol and was killed trying to crawl through a window in the Capitol building.
That's still tragic. Like she died, she didn't have to die. Like the people that died that day, there's just so many and 9/11, like it's all tragic. Like when you look at how fragile and like, life is but a vapor. It's here and then it's gone. It's just really sad that we would throw our bodies into a movement, like especially like January 6th, how tragic that is for those people that got wrapped up in, like, granted, they chose, like, I'm not saying they still deserve the consequences and the punishments that they're getting, not death, but the sentencing. But like they got wrapped up into that, and for what? It was the whole thing. They were lied to about it, and I guess you could say that for just about.
I can
so
think
many
of somebody
historical
else
things.
who deserves punishment for that day. That's been indicted 4 times. Let's hope he faces justice.
Oh,
for
I
that.
don't really have any
Something.
sympathy for the guy from The Apprentice.
But Imad, who's going to come on with us next week, he has told me in the past, after, before 9/11, he said, because his family had come to California from Kuwait, and he said, people would call me like camel jockey or towel head or something like that. And he said, then after 9/11, all of a sudden it's terrorist and people are leaving the restaurant when we come in, and things like that. So it was terrible.
I'm excited to talk to him next week.
I always feel like such a, the airplane freak out videos where someone has gone off the rails on an airport. I always watch those with the tiniest bit of bated breath, because it's always in the back of my mind, like, was someone that is Muslim on that plane and that triggered that person who has not broken down that they were lied to, and that, like, there are so many people who still live with the echoes of that day. And I feel like I so rarely am confronted as a white woman in America. Like, I'm very rarely confronted with the echoes of that day, except for like I was at the airport just recently, and I was laughing because I was like, I remember when you didn't have to take your shoes off. Those are the ways that I'm still confronted with that day and the echoes of that day for me. And I just think about how it must echo for people from the Middle East who are here today, or people who are Muslim, how much the echo must differ.
Yeah. It's interesting just to think about, like, I think about Gen Z and the kids that didn't grow up, like they grew up in a 9/11 world, but didn't actually experience 9/11, like weren't there for like the catalyst of what happened, of like how growing up without that trauma makes it different. Because when you're like coming of age, to see people dying on live TV, like, I'm sure there's probably already studies on it, but that's got it. Like, that is like generational trauma, like just on an entire generation to watch that. And then like a few years later, we had Katrina, where I don't know how many people died, but it was also a lot of people. Like, it just felt like there was like so many things that have happened, and then living through a war that it's like I don't remember a time really where we weren't at war. I mean, other than like the last few years, but it just, like, war became so second nature that it was just part of your vocabulary and part of your daily life, that we almost became desensitized to it, in a sense, as I don't know if it was like a coping mechanism, but like I don't want to be desensitized to war, because it's a terrible, awful thing.
Well, again, it's part of the problem of it all. And yeah, my son basically has, I mean, I guess we could theoretically say we're not at war now, finally, after getting out of Afghanistan, but pretty much every day of his life, we were at war. And it's such a crazy thing. And desensitized is a great word, because when you think about World War II, or, everybody sacrificed. They had, women couldn't get pantyhose, and you couldn't get sugar. Everybody had to sacrifice for the war effort. But these wars, we just ran up deficits. As Americans, we felt no pain from these wars whatsoever. They just wrote blank checks and used a credit card that our children will have to pay for, or our children's children will have to pay for in the future. And I think it's a scary thing. Like when on the home front, you feel no pain. And now with drones, we don't even have to lose human beings. We can just kill people with a remote, and a little stick controller, and And I just think being a violent people, when Jesus said, live by the sword, die by the sword, when you are a people that celebrate your ability to create violence around the world for your own self-protection, and this is a little bit of a harsh thing, but you can't be surprised when violence visits you back. And I just think we've set ourselves up as a violent people from the start. We kick the British ass, and we can beat anybody. And it's not surprising that violence visits us at times because of it. And people hate us around the world.
But I just think like the pursuit of power always creates someone who is oppressed. And most often that oppressed group finds the most. I think about the way that people were leaving Europe at times, and not all of them, like certainly not as many as we were led to believe in middle school, but some of them really truly were like, I just need a life that's different because I am poor, or I am put upon, or I am whatever. And the way that felt oppression turned around and got put upon to the Native Americans, or to when enslavement began, like the ways that people fought off what they remembered genetically as oppression by oppressing others. And you see it go all the way back through history. And so even when you say, like, if you live by the sword, don't be surprised if you die by the sword, from a political standpoint, I can't think of a single country that doesn't adopt a certain amount of being the live by the sword kind of people at some point when push comes to shove. Like I was listening to, and I was like, I'm dumbfounded to think what a world would be where countries were just like, hey, we're just chill being on our own. We don't want to take over you.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too if it's just like the types of personalities that want that kind of power, that would like strive to be like, to lead a whole country. I'm obviously not saying everybody, but like to even get to the top in that way, like I feel like you have to have some sort of like narcissism, or like, do you know, like, because
like if I was the president, I'd be like, hey guys, I like don't want any trouble. I just want to live and let live,
right?
And so even now, what Russia is doing in Ukraine, I struggle to understand it because I'm like, why? Just don't. Like, it's so easy not to.
Right.
And you have to be right. There has to be the people at the top who pursue that kind of leadership and authority. Is it just all world dominator wannabes? Because there's no other explanation that makes sense. As a voting American, I don't want trouble. I just want everyone to get along.
Right. Because I honestly think that the best leaders are people who don't really want to lead.
Ugh. How do we get those people to be president?
I know. Well, they don't want to do it. That's the problem.
Jimmy Carter was a true Christian as president. And of course, Christians all hated him and voted him out for Ronald Reagan, who never once went to church while he was president of the United States. But everybody wanted, and this is when I was in high school, our people in Iran were held hostage for over a year. And Carter said, everybody was telling him, you've got to invade. You can't let them get away with this. And he resisted and said, that's going to do terrible things. We'll pay for that for decades. And he refused. And because of that, and I saw an interview with him once. He said, if I had ordered an invasion, I probably would have been elected for a second term. But because I didn't, the Christians didn't like me because I wasn't tough enough. And Reagan was tough. And so I think out of 9/11, I really want us to look at that. And there's a documentary called Zero Dark 30 that, there's a movie called Zero Dark 30.
I was going to say, did you just call the movie a documentary? I didn't realize there was a documentary.
There is a documentary. They both come from a book originally, but and in the documentary, they're about the killing of Osama bin Laden. And there's a CIA agent in it. And it just really struck me one day. He said, the only way we ever solve our problem in the Middle East is to stop bombing things in the Middle East, because every time we bomb something in the Middle East, the people there say, oh, America is what the extremists tell us they are. The extremists are telling the people, America wants to kill you. And they're like, well, maybe not. Maybe they're good people. And then we blow something up and they're like, oh, Al-Qaeda's right. And he said, every time we blow something up, 100 families give their boys to Al-Qaeda. And he said, and it will never stop until we stop our penchant for wanting to blow things up to try to make it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I think that, like, I'm moving more and more towards like pacifism and like that all war is bad and it's stupid and blah, blah, blah. But the one thing mainly that I always get hung up on is the Holocaust. You know, like when something so awful is happening, like how do you just not get involved? But like in those situations, I'm like, okay, maybe violence is okay to like to stop something so like inhumane and horrible. Like,
but that's the problem. Like the slope of like,
right.
The only way for the system to truly work is for everybody to be that honorable and that of that level of integrity, because otherwise you have to start making decisions of like, this is really, really bad and I should get involved. And the second you have to make those decisions, there will be someone who takes that decision to an extreme and is like, well, now it's my business to police everybody. Congratulations, me.
Yeah.
Well, we have to realize that Jesus was in a society where everybody in his race and religion were saying, we have to overthrow the government. There were zealots everywhere. No Roman governor wanted to work in Palestine because the Jewish people were so problematic and always trying to revolt and everything. And so everyone wanted to overthrow the Roman government. And Jesus was like, no, that's not the point, guys. The Roman government's going to fall. But what we're supposed to do is we need to stop oppressing the Samaritans and the tax collectors and the lepers, and then we will stop being oppressed. So there's just a point where, and I don't know what that's all about, April, that you just put in the chat.
Someone thought that Beecher was saying that I was pregnant. And I was being like, no, I am. Oh, I meant to say not pregnant, but no, I am no pregnant. LOL.
She was in such a rush to type it.
Like, oh no, I am not pregnant.
Beecher called you glowing, but they were just referring to your lighting.
Beecher's just making fun of my lighting.
So they say. Oh.
The like ring light. If they don't do it, they critique what I did because I don't put as much care into it. And Beecher's literally laying in this room right now.
Oh, that's funny.
Try to like sneak back.
I love that they're laying there typing the comments.
I know. So
anyway, Jesus, everybody wanted to overthrow the Roman government in Jesus' culture. And he was very markedly saying that's not that important, guys. What's important is living out of the goodness and love of heaven, and things will change around you. So I get the point of like, you got to be able to stand up against a bully, but I think Jesus was saying, try it and see what happens if humanity can't advance, if some people are willing to, when, sued for their cloak, they give up their tunic too. Like you go farther than you're required by the injustice around you. And I don't know that anybody's really ever tried it. So I think we ought to try it sometime and see what happens.
You just can't try that with a Hitler around though. I don't know. Like, I don't know how to, I hear what you're saying and I agree, but then it's like, but then you look at the world and it's just so like Putin, stupid.
I also think there's like an interesting argument to be made that would be like, and that's probably part of why the Jews were like, oh, cool. Not the Messiah then, because Judaism as a faith is very justice oriented.
Right.
And justice for the world is like baked into the laws. The Jewish law that supersedes any other law is if a life is at stake. If a life is at stake, you can break any of the most holy laws because it is more valuable to save a life than it is to live by the law. So there's an interesting argument to be made that like, yeah, you're absolutely right, Paul. That was what Christ taught and that's valuable. But like clearly Christians not so good at it. Whereas within Judaism, they were like, oh, if that's your vibe, then you're not the Messiah that we are looking for. Yeah. we're good. And one could argue that Jews have started way less wars than Christians have in modern day culture.
I don't know if you even need to argue that. I think that's
that's
just true.
Well, the United States has a larger military than the next 5 largest militaries in the world combined. We spend, I think last time I looked, it's something like $890 billion a year on military. And just imagine what we could do with that money.
Oh, it's disheartening to think about. My husband is a veteran. He was in the Marines, and we have conversations around every election when people start trotting out like what their plans are for the military budget. And even when someone is like talking about the potential of maybe cutting the budget and everyone's up in arms, it makes him crazy because he's like, they're talking about like the grocery budget for families and things like that. They're not talking about military spending as a superpower. And he wishes that more people understood what the real words like military budget mean to active duty people, because it gets so manipulated into this power dynamic of like, oh, well, if you don't vote for me, the military budget's going to get cut and we're susceptible to whatever harm and whatever potential threat. But really the money's not coming from those things.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a side rant that just
no, but I appreciate it. That's on topic. It's not too
healthcare. Yep. Veteran benefits. Veteran benefits are the first thing to go when they cut military spending. It's not actual weapons.
Well, probably our economy would suffer if we weren't, again, writing all those blank checks to pay that military. And then many of the politicians' friends who get incredibly wealthy from the military contracts that they get would be angry as well. So it's kind of a thing. Anyway, we should hit a break, and we're going to talk education and PragerU coming soon to a school near you. Let's see.
Evangelical-ish. Follow us to catch all the latest content and encouragement. You can check us out on TikTok by following @Evangelical-ish or subscribe on YouTube by searching Evangelical-ish. That's Evangelical with an ISH. And don't forget to catch our live streams each and every single Wednesday night on YouTube at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 Pacific. And now, back to the Evangelical-ish podcast.
All right. At this time where we can't teach CRT in schools, where it wasn't being taught anyway, but we can't teach that we used to have slaves apparently or anything. 2 states thus far, Florida, or the People's Republic of Florida, perhaps, or whatever we
call it that.
That's what DeSantis says. Florida, where woke goes to die. Or comes to die, whatever.
Guys, I had to explain who DeSantis was to my kids this week because we saw a bumper sticker for the first time. It was my first in the wild DeSantis 2024 bumper sticker. And my daughter, who's very politically aware, was like, who's that person, Mom? Who's that person? What do they stand for? And she dropped her very first F-bomb because after I explained it to her, she said, Mom, I really want to say the F word. Can I say the F word? And I said, go ahead. And she said, what the fuck? And I was so proud. I'm sorry.
Oh,
somebody I heard called it the other day, like Floralandistan or something like that. But Florida and Oklahoma have decided that PragerU can be taught in their public schools. And so I pulled an example of a PragerU rework of history. This is 2 young children from today going back in the past to visit Christopher Columbus, who explains why the bad name he has today is not fair. So we'll get a blind reaction from you guys for this.
We live 500 years from now, and there's a holiday for you, but it's really controversial and we're confused.
Nice! I have a holiday? Well, caramba! I should! I've worked so hard to get to this point, and what I just accomplished was insane!
I'm sorry, Mr. Columbus, but I heard at school that you spoiled paradise and you brought slavery and murder to peaceful people.
Caramba! Those are some accusations. there are other tribes, the Caribs, who are vicious, warring cannibals.
Cannibals? Like they.
Eat people, see.
Whoa.
So, these people in your time who think it was a peaceful paradise are misinformed. Or lying.
Yeah, but what about slavery? You didn't deny that.
Deny? No. Slavery is as old as time and has taken place in every corner of the world, even amongst the people I just left. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no?
In our time, we view slavery as being evil and terrible.
Ah, how can you come here to the 15th century and judge me by your standards from the 21st century? For those in the future to look back and do this is, well, estúpido. Some things are clearly bad, no matter when they happen. But for other things, before you judge, you must ask yourself, what did the culture and society at the time treat as no big deal?
Oh my gosh. But the left is indoctrinating our children. That is wild. That was way worse than I was even expecting, and I was expecting bad. Wouldn't it be better to be a slave than to die?
Better to be a slave than to die.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
That
I'm
was
actually
just-
speechless.
Why were his eyes like that? It was so.
They are a little demony.
They
If
were
you-
so deep. Like, if you're trying so hard to convince me that he wasn't a bad man, why did he look like a fucking demon?
Ay, caramba.
Ay, caramba. Oh my God.
Oh man.
That was literally a whitewashing of history.
Yeah. That I don't even know what to say.
Also, I hate that the kids were like, that the girl was sort of like an ambiguous color. So we don't know if she was supposed to represent like a person of color. Because I feel like inserting people of color into that is like, see, this is a person who we're talking about, and it's fine with them. They're fine with it, you know. Oh, this was so insidious and gross. I hate that I'm here, and I resent that you brought me here.
So they're trying to put videos like that. Like the history I was taught was whitewashed, but it wasn't.
I know when she
That
was like in
whitewashed.
school, we're taught that you're the worst, and I was like, who taught that? Who
Yeah, I
has
wasn't
ever
taught that.
that.
I was taught Columbus was a good Christian man.
Ugh.
That was it.
Yeah. That
Um,
all those explorers went and did what they did because of God. And they, it was all played into the manifest destiny narrative.
Can you explain what PragerU is for people who are asking? I don't know if I can fully explain what it is. It's called Prager University, right?
Yeah. I mean, PragerU is its name. And I guess U is supposed to mean university.
But it's not an actual university. They just like put out educational materials. They're very conservative. It was started by Dennis Prager, who is a conservative.
So they're
Something.
not a university, though. It's not like a
No.
school.
No,
And
Did
it's
they just called themselves that to like borrow legitimacy?
I don't know. Does the U actually stand for university, or is it just PragerU?
I think it's just PragerU, but
Yeah.
they're
You
trying
know-
to play
yeah,
on that
they-
it's educational. And it's funded by one of the Koch brothers, by the way. It is exclusively
so.
funded.
Fun
Ugh.
fact: one of my videos.
There can be no fun anymore after viewing
Well,
that.
I definitely
Fun is
meant
dead.
I meant fun in a sarcastic way. But one of my videos was featured on PragerU's website or their social media channels because they have different talking heads that
I just feel like they're barstool for politics.
that they kind of are in a sense. But the amount of hate that I got because they
Was
stitched
it
one
so
of my videos,
bad?
it was the same one Ben Shapiro did with my daughter called the
Why do you
American
hate
flag
that one
Dumbo.
so much.
Dumbo Trump flag. They seriously hate that my 4-year-old at the time called it the Dumbo Trump flag. She only called him Dumbo because she couldn't pronounce Donald when she was 3 and it just stuck. And
But
honestly, it
also
was more
the sheer
fitting.
number of them who don't understand that she was not alive before Donald Trump was president Like,
right.
I don't, and that your 3-year-old doesn't have a more comprehensive understanding of
know.
U.S. history. April, what have you been doing?
Right. Like, and at the time we lived in freaking Cleveland, Tennessee, there were 2 Trump stores that we would drive by that literally, like, outside of it were just flags. It was American flags and then Trump's face on flags. Like, of course a child is going to associate the two. Anyway, that was a total random thing. But I did want to read this thing. This went viral a few years ago. Oh, it was during 2020, right after George Floyd was murdered, and like worldwide, all the Black Lives Matter protests were popping up. PragerU made a bunch of videos about anti-racism and how it was kind of like a scam or whatever. But this is one thing that this is the description of one of the videos. The video is titled, "Are You Really Anti-Racist?" And this is their description. They also tweeted this. They said, "Young people are enamored with anti-racist rhetoric because they think they are fighting racist systems in America. The truth is they are fighting America itself and the very values the country was founded on."
Oof.
But they ran into the point
Yeah, I was saying they're
and
not
missed
wrong.
it. They missed that is not, they said it, but they didn't
That's
mean
like
it.
the definition of they had me in the first half. I was like, I think you're missing the. Oh no, you get the point. That
No,
is
they get
that
it.
is true.
They're being like, how dare you call America racist? That's not it. But it's like,
I don't think you're mad that America is racist. I just think you're mad at the systems that built America. Yes. What?
Correct. Well, it's like the flag, it's like you shouldn't, men died so that we could wave that flag. Yes. And they also died so that we could burn it if we want to.
And they also shouldn't have died because war is stupid.
I have to show you another quick PragerU video.
There's another one.
This is
they made more than one.
They have a lot of them,
and they're trying to put these in public schools.
This is like
in
the
Florida
opposite.
and Oklahoma.
Do you know the show Drunk History?
Yes.
These PragerU videos are like the opposite. If there was an opposite of that, it's these PragerU videos.
This one is by a woman who is critical of the video, so you'll hear her talking in it.
Thank God.
But this is about good parenting being taught by PragerU, and it is enjoy.
Premise on the assumption that obedient children are happy children.
When was the last time you heard a child referred to as obedient? It's probably been a while. That's too bad, because the best research tells us that obedient children are happy children.
The speaker, John Rosemond, tells parents that the way to get obedient children is to give them commands and never explain why you're telling, not asking them to do something.
Explanations invite arguments. Whenever parents tell me they're dealing with an argumentative child, I know that these well-intentioned people are explaining themselves. They tell the child why they want him to pick up his toys, for example.
Oh, the horror.
And he argues, because you can always pick apart an explanation.
And he even says that you should never bend down to get on your child's level when you talk to them, because that makes it look like you have no confidence, like you're bowing down to your child.
Bending down to a child's level does not look authoritative. It looks, in fact, like you're one movement away from being down on your knees in front of a king. I know you've read somewhere that you should get down to a child's level when you talk to him. All I can tell you is that there's a lot of really bad parenting advice.
And the more...
So, and she went on to say she did research. They list their resources for their information. And she said there were four books that they used as references for this video, and all 4 of them were written by that guy.
He's his own source.
Yes.
Oh Lord.
I should know. I'm an authority.
Does that guy not look like the villain in a James Bond movie?
No, he looks like the villain in a Beethoven movie. He looks like he wants to steal my puppies.
He's
All
like
he
the
needs
male
is like an
Cruella.
over-the-top sidekick dressed all in one
Mhm.
color.
He
How
looks
dare
like a
you
man that you
explain
would,
things?
yeah, you would say, I'm not going to let my children go, ride in that man's car to ice cream. I can tell you that.
I that goes against every parenting thing that
ethic.
I
Yep.
do.
Like my own instincts. It goes
Mhm.
against everything that I believe about parenting, but also everything that I understand from personal lived experience is the wrong way to parent. Like that video was triggering as fuck, dude.
Yeah.
And it's part of that post 9/11 mindset of Christianity. It's like they're coming to get us. We have to take over the schools and put our indoctrination in there before they try to indoctrinate our kids. And it's just horrifying.
Ugh. It's just so weird how this so often to get Americans to understand other countries the way the government wants us to, they talk about the use of propaganda in those countries. And America's always had a very strong nationalistic, patriotic streak. But I really feel like in my lifetime, in my conscious adult lifetime, there has been a shift in the amount of propaganda that just gets passed in the public square. Like, oh, it's okay. This is fine. Like the opportunity to call out bullshit on things has gone so way down. I remember the genuine panic I felt when Trump started choosing what news sources would be in the room at press briefings at the White House. Like, oh, it just feels like this is straight up propaganda. And how do the people who tell us we should hate China for their propaganda not understand that? Oh, it's so confusing.
Well, it's
Ugh.
like this mindset too that you can mold your child into whatever you want them to be. Like they are there to be owned
To
in a
absorb what
sense.
you want for them to absorb.
Right. They're supposed to grow up and just be you, but better. Like not better and like a good person better. Like what you stand for, like even stronger. And it was like that lady who lost her mind and went viral. She didn't actually lose her mind, but she like went off the rails going mad about the Turning Red Pixar Disney movie because
Ugh.
the 13-year-old girl in the movie got her period and she thought it was
no.
too old for her children. And I don't remember what the exact line was, but she said something about like children are not people, children are children. And I think that is like fundamentally what so many people don't view their children as actual people,
Yeah.
as like human beings. They looked at as almost like the subservient, almost like a pet, but
Right.
with a social security number.
Or like
Uh,
a second chance. Like if I raise you in all the exact ways I felt a deficit, you will have better than I do. I do think a lot of it boils down to that, where they look at their kid and they're like, I'm gonna give you the life I never had so that I kind of get the life that I wanted through you, kind of a vibe. And
mhm.
so I think people impart those things on their kids because they're like, if now you know, and you know sooner than I knew, and you'll be better for it. But it just turns kids into fucking assholes.
Right. The Duggar children were all obedient, and Josh
Yeah.
Duggar is in prison.
Whoa.
I was a very obedient child and I was not a happy child. I can tell you that. But and there's this love of authority and authoritarianism that runs through Christianity that's in that video, like, no, you have to be the authority in the children's life and
Yeah.
have them fear you because fearing God is the beginning of wisdom. And it's
Which is
just
so crazy.
and that's why they love Trump. And I think many Christians wish like he would take over as an authoritarian and in
Ugh.
Yeah.
democracy, so they could be in charge. It's really scary stuff.
There's
I wonder
such a
if
desire to be told like you're doing it right and this will result in success and a successful whatever you're doing. Which is so crazy to me because the context of the concept of faith is like an unknowable. There's a whole chapter in a whole book about it in the book they read. Like faith cannot be seen, it cannot be trusted beyond the risk you take trusting it. And yet they need everything to be so specific and so sure. And every step has to have a promise connected. And for us to be in favor, that means there are people who are out of favor. Like, it's so crazy. It's so antithetical to faith.
Mm-hmm. I just had this thought, and maybe it's a stupid thought, but I wonder if part of the reason so many evangelicals flocked to what Trump was doing and like were okay with the bullying and the way that he just kind of became this authoritative figure is because they just saw him doing to the country what they were doing at home with their own kids, but just on a large scale. Kind of like, because I do feel like so many Christian homes, and my dad was like that too, to a degree. It was just like very authoritative, like whatever the man of the house said went. And like, it was, I was scared of my dad a lot of the time. And my dad was like I also loved him too. And it was like, he was one of the good ones.
You were scared of his authority.
Right. Exactly. I was scared of his authority because I knew at any moment he could just, and like, I don't know, like my parents were, I don't know how to say that. Like, I guess controlling in a way. Like, my friends were allowed to do things that I was not allowed to do. And I was a good kid and I did all these things, but it was not a free like childhood. Like I still have, like I'll have dreams where I'm back in high school in my house with my parents, like wanting to go, not even to a party. Like I wasn't even a partier, but just like wanting to go out and be out past 11 with some of my friends, and like knowing I wasn't allowed to go because whatever the reason was. And I felt so suffocated, and I couldn't wait to grow up and be able to leave and like actually be my own person. And like, I had a good childhood. There wasn't anything bad about it, but there's something truly suffocating about this, like, just feeling like someone is in control over you. And that only accelerated when I went to a really strict Christian school, which I think if I ever had a taste of a theocracy, it was going to that frickin' Assemblies of God college, which makes me very anti-Christian nationalism because nobody wants that. It is suffocating and it's not fun.
And it's based on the idea that we're dirt and terrible people and incapable of doing good. That original sin theology is a real killer there. So by the way, the state superintendent of Oklahoma, a guy named Ryan Walker, who is a full-on nutball, I've got a video of him I'm making a TikTok about for tomorrow. He spoke at a church, of course, a non-text church, 501c3, and he of course said, Joe Biden wants to end all Christianity in America, which is, spot on, right?
Yeah, because he's not a Christian or anything.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing was, though, is he was saying, this is Oklahoma. This is not China. This is not California. This is where, and he says, this is where woke goes to die. Yeah. So, but I love that my state got thrown in there with China and California. There we go. Great.
Oh my gosh. It's been so eye-opening being on like this side of those accusations. Like, I used to be like, oh, liberals hate God. Like, I don't know if I would have said that overtly, but I definitely believed it because that's what people thought. And like, here I am, a liberal. Like, I don't hate God. Like, it's just, life comes at you fast.
I think it's just interesting because when you're on the other side of it, there are two options, right? You either love God or you are actively working against God.
Yeah.
And when you're on the other side of it, you're like, oh, actually, most people are like somewhere on the scale of indifferent to cool with God. Very few people are anti-God, and most of those people are just hurting. And then there's like a smattering of actively working against God, but they're also a little fringe and weird, so it's fine. But I remember being in the beginning, like I thought that way too. I remember, oh God, I used to tell people like in women's Bible studies and things like that, I would say you can have or be one of two kinds of friends, the kind of friends that actively move you closer to God or actively pull you away.
Yeah,
because
and then
that's how you think. You think in that binary.
And you couldn't have genuine friends because you were always trying to figure out, are you pulling me closer to God or are you pushing me away?
And so the trajectory of thinking of everything in that binary to being like, most people are just pretty chill. They're just chill and in their own thing. They're not concerned with you.
Well, and that's really well said, Abby. And by the way, by God, they mean their interpretation of who God should be. And by the way, I do hate that God. That is not a spirit of heaven. That is a man-made creation that traumatizes human beings. And funny thing, April, I have dreams on a fairly regular basis now where I've been invited to speak at a church and I'm like terrified. I'm in like the worship service and I'm going, oh my God, they don't know that I've deconstructed. What are they going to say? You know, I'm just terrified.
Oh my gosh. I've had similar dreams where I've been at church and they just start going on some Trump Christian nationalist rant. And I just have had enough that I stand up and I scream at them, stop it! This is not of Jesus! And like just start doing like a whole sermon and then storm out. I haven't done it, but I've dreamed about it. Literally.
PragerU coming soon to a school. near you.
Oh my
But it's
gosh.
the drag
Caramba.
queens that are doing the indoctrinating.
Dude, it's so bizarre. But it's always I won't say always. That's not fair. # not all Christians. But it so often follows the like what someone focuses on is the thing they're actually doing themselves. Like how many pastors who have fallen are pastors who are known for their many, many, many sermons on purity and, a true love and like that sort of thing, like the thing that people focus on. And so it's so interesting to me, the Christians being like, they're trying to indoctrinate the children. They're trying to get the children to think like them. And that's not okay. They should only think like us.
Every Christian accusation is a confession, right?
Yes.
Well, there was one of the leaders of Moms for Liberty was interviewed by someone on TikTok, and she was like going off mad that they were teaching kids empathy. And like they don't like
so
the idea.
Confusing.
Right. Like they're mad that like kids can think for themselves and like feel empathy with other people. Like what do y'all hear yourselves?
It's
like
so bizarre.
It's okay. I once wrote that that being open-minded is one of Satan's greatest tools.
Ooh, yeah.
So
No thinking aloud, no
I
introspection.
know, it's so cringy. I know when I said these things. I was throwing lemons at liberals. Not really.
The thing is, I grew up in for an evangelical home, we were charismatic / Pentecostal, but my dad, by the standard, was pretty liberal. And so I missed a lot of the Christian nationalism stuff because he didn't teach that way. And it wasn't but we were very connected to a lot of churches that did veer those directions. So I don't have a lot of firsthand experience with it. So when you talk like this, it is such a out of my element experience. I'm like, what do you mean you have written that? Like when? And the answer for you could truly be anywhere between the ages of 6 and like 5 years ago. And that's so crazy to me because it's just so like, I'm so proud that you are someone who fought your way out of it. I don't know. Sorry. It's just so crazy when you talk like that. I'm always like, April, you're such a good person.
Not my past mate.
No, you're past. But I think that who you are is who you are for such a long time. And like, I see glimmers of people that I know now that I knew then. And so every time I'm confronted with someone who has changed so dramatically from where they once were, I just feel so much gratitude for them. And I'm trying to say it more. That's a personal goal of mine. Just let me do it, April, who, if you're listening to this later, I just want you to know is looking at me wildly uncomfortable because April cannot take a compliment.
No, I can't.
To save her life.
Because I grew up a female in the church and only the men got compliments. I had to be a servant.
We should mention that Jeremy was under the weather tonight.
Yes.
And Abby pinch hit. So we're so glad you were able to come and hang out with us, Abby.
I'm so glad to have been here. I'm sorry.
On a fairly painful show.
Yes. I do just want to say really quick before we move on that because I have changed, that is what gives me hope that other people like still really deep in it can change, because like I was very much in it, and I don't think I was a bad person at the time. I had good intentions actually with it all. And that's just, I try to read back my cringy old journal just to remind myself, okay, people can change and it's possible and we shouldn't give up on people, but we should set boundaries.
But April, I mean this really truly. You are someone, knowing you personally, yes. But even if I was only familiar with your content that you put out, I would feel that hope because of you. I do feel that hope because of you, because I'm still connected relationally to a lot of people who are very deep in it, who I look at and I'm like, man, I know that there is a good person in there, and I struggle. I want to stay in relationship with you, but I struggle because of the disconnects. You give me hope in those relationships, and I've learned to set boundaries as well, and like learned when that hope, where that hope's end needs to be at times. But I just appreciate the hope. It's so easy to feel hopeless in such a polarized society.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Abby.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming on the show tonight so last minute. Will you tell everybody where they can find you if they'd like to find you?
Yes, you can find me on all social platforms at that Abbey Smith, Abbey. I'm currently working on a podcast,
Woot woot.
but I've also been saying that for a while. But I do have a newsletter that you can sign up for at my website, which is thatabbysmith.com.
Yay.
All right.
Well,
hope
I'm
people check
sure
it out.
you will be on again sometime soon. Hopefully next time we'll with more planning.
And next Wednesday, don't miss it. We will have live streaming with a friend of mine, Imad, who will tell us about life as a person of the Islamic faith living in the United States post 9/11 and beyond. And so it's always fascinating to me to learn about other people's religions now that I'm convinced a demon won't jump on me when I do so.
Yeah, that you don't feel this tug to like have to convert them as they're telling you either. Where you can just
Where you can
learn.
actually listen and not be thinking of where's my in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Where can I plant the seed?
Praying, Lord, manipulate their brain so I can win them for you. Win them for you, Lord.
Yeah. So join us next week as we try to convert Paul's friend. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
But what if he converts us?
Oh, plot twist.
Yes.
You'd have to drop the ish off of evangelical-ish, because then you'd definitely be out.
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
we would just be gone. It would just be X at that point.
It would just be ish.
Yeah. It's true.
All right, Abby, thanks for being with us. April, good to hang out with you. And thanks to everybody. Our first commenter tonight came on at 5:05 my time, 55 minutes before the start of the show. So
that's amazing.
We love having you guys hang out with us. Yeah. All right, good night, everybody. We will see you again if you're listening on podcast. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you all again soon.